Namaskar to all of you. This is a series on Sri Aurobindo's book, Synthesis of Yoga. And we have been exploring the section on Jnana Yoga, which Sri Aurobindo expresses as yoga of integral knowledge in the previous section and about 7-8 of the previous talks. And in our journey of exploring the Jnana Yoga, the first step was to look at what is it that we are seeking in Jnana Yoga. What is it that we are referring to as Jnana? Is it the knowledge written in Shastras or books? Or is it the knowledge of some technique or process of yoga? Or is it the answer to the question that who am I? And Sri Aurobindo in yoga of integral knowledge goes beyond all these questions and sets our compass in the direction of seeking an answer to what is it that drives all of us. What is that driving force behind the physical, the prana, the mind and its thoughts? What is that driving force in all of us? And that driving force, which is the tapas shakti, a Shakti which is equally seated and embodying all of us and all animate and inanimate beings, is the true seeking of Jnana Yoga. Because that Tapas Shakti is also an answer to the knowledge in all the Shastras. It is the source of all techniques and processes, and it also offers the answer to the question, who am I? Because that Tapas Shakti is constantly in communion with the supreme absolute divine, which is beyond this universe, which is formless yet infinite. And yet that Tapas Shakti is the driving force of our day-to-day daily activities. So to seek that, to know that, to understand that, to feel that, to discover that, is the true seeking of Jnana Yoga. And once we have clarity on this object of knowledge, once we have set the compass right, then comes about the process of Jnana Yoga. And that Sri Aurobindo summarizes in 4 steps. And that's true for any form of yoga, be it Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti, any form of yoga. The first step being purification, the second step being liberation, third, perfection, and fourth, delight. In Sanskrit, they are expressed as Shuddhi, Mukti, Siddhi, and Bhukti. We looked at an analogy in one of the previous talks to express the same thing as making a sabzi. The first step for making a sabzi is to wash the vegetables and cut them, chop them. So purify them, Shuddhi. The next step is to put all those vegetables in a pan and heat them. And in process, they are liberated of their own individuality and they become one. So that is the mukti. And then you need to add that right flavor and taste to it to bring in that perfection, which is the siddhi. And then eventually there is the joy or delight of bhog, which is the bhukti. So to any form of yoga, there are these 4 steps. And for yoga of integral knowledge or Jnana Yoga also, these 4 steps are essential. And the first one is paramount in Jnana Yoga, which is purification. Because purification anchors and lays a strong foundation to the whole process. And in the next few chapters, Sri Aurobindo elaborates on the 3 key aspects to the purification. The first being purification itself, but purification needs its yin and yang partner, or the feminine and masculine partners, to balance itself. So purification needs concentration, and purification and concentration need renunciation. So it is the triad or the 3 of purification, concentration and renunciation which are key foundational element in the larger subject of Shuddhi or purification. And then he redefines the meaning of all these 3 for us. Purification is not just a process of cleansing oneself, it is a process of restoring each faculty of human system to its natural tendencies, to the dharmic tendencies of the particular faculty. For example, the prana or the vital in us, its natural or dharmic tendency is to seek joy in what is there in the present moment. Whereas the adharmic tendencies, or what we naturally find it doing, is that prana goes about seeking joy in past or future. Once I have this, I will have happiness. Once this happens, I will have happiness. Or this happened because of which my joy or happiness was lost. So the natural tendency restoration of each faculty of human system, which is prana, the physical, the senses, the buddhi and the heart, is the actual process of purification. And then concentration for us very often takes a meaning as exclusive concentration on the divine, or one particular name of the divine, or all the time japa of one particular name of the divine. But here Sri Aurobindo elaborates that concentration doesn't have to be an exclusive concentration. There is a possibility that concentration can become all-inclusive. Concentration is not just on the divine beyond this universe, but also includes the manifestation of the divine, all the creation of the divine, and seeing the divine in every individual, in every object. That becomes into an all-inclusive concentration, which is the aspiration or the highest possibility of concentration. And then renunciation is not a process of rejection of world as Maya. It's not an outward process of this is Maya and this is difficult to live in and I'm going to renounce this world and renounce and wait for being liberated from the cycle of birth and death. That is not the true renunciation. The true renunciation is an inward renunciation. It is a renunciation of craving and desires in the senses. It is a renunciation of love with attachments. It is a renunciation of attachment to one's own viewpoints, that what I am thinking, how I am seeing the divine is the way to see the divine. And rather, it is a renunciation of entire doership eventually, and acting out of the space inwardly from the divine. So this purification, concentration and renunciation form the first steps or foundational elements in exploring Jnana Yoga. And then the next step is from Shuddhi to Mukti or liberation. And when we talk about liberation or Mukti, the common connotation it takes for us is a connotation of liberation from the cycle of birth and death. However, Sri Aurobindo very clearly points out that it is a process of liberation where there is a release from the physical body, from the heart, from the mind, not with the intention of leaving this body, but with the intention of reclaiming one's true nature. We all are in a way a spark of the divine. And as this spark of the divine, there is an inherent infinite nature and infinite capacity built in all of us. But when we take up this garb of this physical body, this mind, this prana, then it brings with this a certain sense of inertia, a certain sense of ignorance, a certain sense of limitation in our being. And the purpose of liberation is to reclaim our infinite nature. The intention is to bring in a mastery where there's mind over matter and eventually the soul over both mind and matter. So with this intention, we embark on the journey of liberation with the intention of reclaiming one's infinite capacities. And in the previous chapter, Sri Aurobindo describes the process of release from the physical or release from the subjection to the body. And he offers us a beautiful affirmation that one may say to oneself in order to take the first step in this release, which is a certain separation or distance from the physical. And the affirmation is that this is not myself or thyself. This is one working of the Prakriti. Stand back from it. It's a powerful statement because when we say, I am not this body, I am something else, then our ego takes another form. But when one says, this is not myself or thyself, this is one working of the Prakriti, stand back from it, there is an opportunity to create a separation and take up the witness position. And from that witness position, there is a possibility of observing all the different feelings that are emerging in this body. All the different attachments that this body has. All the different emotions that are arising in this body and the impact it is having on this physical sphere. And initially, this process of observation happens from the level of mind. But then eventually, the mind starts to discover that at the center of mind, the true observer is the Purusha or the Sakshi Purusha. And then gradually mind turns into a relayer of the information to the Sakshi Purusha. We looked at an analogy to understand this in the previous chapter, the analogy of seeing the physical body as a car and the mind as the driver. So the first step is to say, this car, I'm not, this is not myself, this is not thyself, this is one working of the Prakriti. And witness it from the space of driver. And then the driver gradually starts to realize that there is somebody also observing the driver, which is a neutral bystander on the road. And from that space, one can truly witness without interfering with the car and without being so affected by what is happening to the car. And then gradually, this neutral bystander, which is the Sakshi or the witness, when it is empowered by the Shakti, so Purusha and Prakriti are the workings of lower nature, and there is a higher possibility of Shakti. So when Purusha gets empowered with the Shakti, then it transforms into the master of this lower nature, or this neutral bystander transforms into the traffic control. And that is where lies the possibility of mastery or reclaiming our power as the master of our being. Moving forward, this chapter is about the release from the heart and the mind. And this background was essential because one cannot talk about a release from the heart and mind without first talking about the release from the subjection of the body, which is essential to this whole process. To understand why one would need a release from the heart and the mind, why not it is enough to just de-identify from the physical and still hold on to the heart and the mind? Why is it important? For that, we need to reflect upon the principle of life energy, the vital energy or the prana, how it operates in all of us. This life energy principle, its natural tendency is to go out and reach out for things, to absorb what is outside it, absorb it and assimilate it. And when we go about, or when this life energy goes about doing this, there is a certain satisfaction or dissatisfaction it gets out of it. And when there is this satisfaction or dissatisfaction, it brings in a certain attraction towards that or a certain repulsion towards that. If we look at it with an example, let's say we go to a shopping mall or a market, our life energy is driven towards buying certain things, to absorb something which is outside us. It's very clearly visible in children where they want to touch everything. And then when we buy something, it brings in certain satisfaction, or if we wanted to buy something and we could not buy something, it brings in certain dissatisfaction. Or if we bought something and it was not what we were exactly looking for, it still brings in certain dissatisfaction. Or if you are the husband who is tagging along with the wife, then there is another level of dissatisfaction. Then in this, the life energy will have a certain conditioning towards future attraction towards the same thing, or a certain repulsion towards the same thing. And this is happening in all animate forms. It's happening in plants. A plant will reach out towards the sunlight. The roots will grow in the direction of water. It is happening in animals. But in human beings, it takes another connotation, which is that it influences our intellect. Our intellect or buddhi, which has a tendency to offer value to everything. It gets influenced into by this principle, giving more value to one thing and less value to another thing. And when that happens, then the true nature of buddhi, which is meant to be more equanimous and equal in order to neutrally assess every situation, becomes unequal. Jnana Yoga cannot happen in a state of inequality of the mind. And by this principle of prana, or this life energy conditioning of attraction, repulsion, satisfaction, dissatisfaction, different value is offered to everything. We can understand this by an example of goal setting. Goal setting is something which is considered essential, very important for embarking on any journey. But when this goal setting happens from the space of vital energy, for example, from the West, a lot of personal growth material that comes is about manifestation, and they talk about setting a goal. I want to be a billionaire, or I want to be a millionaire. I want to have so much money in this many years. When this goal is set, and very often it comes from a prana space, from this life energy space, I want to be this successful, I want to have this big house, then in the intellect there is an influence to it, and each of these things are orchestrated in such a way that they take a certain importance. Something which will drive us towards this goal will become more important, and something which will take us away from this goal will become less important or less valued. And in process, for that person, the development of the aesthetic sense or relationships or personal health may take less importance and will be less valued versus something which will help him grow in his work profile. And of course, when this happens, it puts the person in a disbalanced state inside, a state of inequality and conflict within his own being, because there is this heart whose needs are to be fulfilled, there is this intellect whose needs are to be fulfilled, there is prana. So this whole system goes into a state of chaos and confusion, and in process, the intellect eventually becomes a puppet to the life energy. It becomes into something like Dhritarashtra in Mahabharata, who is meant to symbolize the buddhi which is blind and yet feels like he is the king. And he feels that he is doing dharma, but is yet driven by the life energy principle of Duryodhana. So it turns into Dhritarashtra, a puppet in the hand of life energy. And in process, the definition of dharma changes for us. What is good, what is bad changes for us. And in this confusion, the only thing that wins is the desire soul. And this desire soul, which is something which mimics the true soul in us, which appears as if that it is the true light, becomes the driver rather than the true lasting happiness in us. We start seeking the pleasure in the immediate life rather than seeking the true lasting happiness, or what does the divine demand of us. As we also looked at, we in this chapter or in the previous chapters, on the natural state of this prana. The natural state of this prana is to enjoy what is there in front of it in the present moment. The true dharma of the senses, which is to lay passive and transmit whatever rasa is coming from outside, the navrasas, and transmit them to the higher centers without influencing the higher centers. This dharma is lost, and in process, in the whole being, there is a chaos of dual emotions. There is anger, there is hatred, there is fear, there is jealousy, there is love and hatred, there is hope, there is disappointment, there is fragmentation and unition, there is satisfaction, there is dissatisfaction. And in this whole chaos, the one thing which is winning again and again is the desire soul, which mimics to be the true soul. And at this point, Sri Aurobindo enlightens us with a statement that this chaos we call our soul, but the real soul, the real psychic entity, which for the most part we see little of, and only a small minority in mankind has developed, is an instrument of pure love, joy, and the luminous reaching out to fusion and unity with God and our fellow creatures. This psychic entity is covered up by the play of the mentalized prana or the desire mind, which we mistake for the soul. The emotional mind is unable to mirror the real soul in us, the divine in our hearts, and is obliged instead to mirror the desire mind. So if the emotional mind in us, the heart, is like a mirror, then there is a possibility that it can mirror the true bulb of light, the real soul in us, or this bulb is covered with this mentalized prana. So this real bulb is covered with a muck of this mentalized prana. And it's a very important point for us to all reflect in us, that is the emotional mind, this mirror in us, mirroring the mentalized prana, or is it mirroring the real soul or the true bulb of light in us? And when we reflect on this question, then naturally an aspiration arises in our being to truly mirror this psychic entity, to discover this psychic entity, and to mirror this particular psychic entity into the emotional mind. And the process for mirroring the psychic entity involves separation from this mentalized prana. And that is the importance of the release from the mind and the heart. And again, for this process to be initiated, Sri Aurobindo again offers an affirmation, just like he does for the physical. And the affirmation is, I am not this thing that struggles and suffers. I am not this thing which grieves and rejoices, loves and hates, hopes and is baffled, is angry and afraid, cheerful and depressed, a thing of vital moods and emotional passions. All these are merely workings and habits of Prakriti in the sensational and emotional mind. So the mirror of emotional mind is not just mirroring the mentalized prana, it is simultaneously also mirroring a sense of ego. I am this, I am here. And this ego is seated not just in the physical, it is also seated in the subconscious mind. Our heart and our intellect, to a degree, has realized that, okay, I am one with everyone. I aspire to be one with everyone. I am one with God. But this sense of individuality is built in the subconscious mind. So this emotional mind is mirroring both a sense of I and this desire mind. And this affirmation, I am not this thing which struggles and suffers, which rejoices and grieves, loves and hates, offers us to take a back seat from both the subconscious I and also from these dual emotions that we go through. And it offers us an opportunity to witness the flow of these emotions as waves which come and go. And as these waves of emotions come and go, it's an opportunity for us, for all of us in this moment, to close our eyes and go through this process simultaneously. We can all close our eyes and just focus on our breath. And for starters, say to ourselves that this is not myself or thyself. This physical body is one working of the Prakriti. Stand back from it. And look at the feelings running in this physical body. And then we say to ourselves that I am also not these emotions, these highs and lows, these expansions and contractions, these fragmentations and unitions, these emotions of joy or love or hatred or sadness. I stand back from these emotions. And as one witnesses these emotions, gradually one goes through these cycles of witnessing and again getting identified with these emotions. With this movement, our attention goes out to the movement and we re-identify with these emotions. But then gradually we again come back to the witness position, only to again identify with these emotions. But slowly a possibility emerges as the second step of gradual development of a space of calmness, an undisturbed calmness within the being. And this calm witness sees these external movements of emotions, is open to these external movements of emotions, yet they are impacting only superficially. They do not disturb a deeper calm which starts to be built in to this witness. And as this calmness or witness space deepens, it gradually starts to then open up towards a dynamic possibility of love and delight. It deepens to the degree that it no more stays static. It turns into a dynamic space of love and delight. And this space of love and delight opens up to a higher compassion. A higher compassion, the divine compassion, which sees and understands and accepts the suffering of all. Sri Aurobindo describes this higher compassion as the higher divine compassion which sees, understands, accepts the burden of others, is strong to help and heal, not with self-will and revolt against the suffering in the world, and with ignorant accusation of law of things and source, but with light and knowledge, and as an instrument of the divine in its emergence. This higher divine compassion from the witness space doesn't accuse Prakriti. It doesn't revolt against the Prakriti. It sees and understands the divine hand behind everything that is happening. And it accepts it. It endures it. And from that space is ready to empower all. So this deeper space, as the witness deepens, initially the witness in us gets identified. We think we are going to witness, but then again there is a little turbulence of emotion in us and we come back to that outer space. But gradually through practice, there is this development of this calmness inside the witness space that it seems like things are falling externally and not impacting the inner space. And then as it deepens, there is a possibility of this higher compassion. This higher compassion is not reaching out for things. It's a dynamic space, yet it is not reaching out for things. It is an all-encompassing embrace. It loves with an embrace. It is not grabbing, it is embracing everything. So just like in our outer life, there is a possibility of action and inaction. In this inner space, there is a possibility of calm steadiness, or there is a possibility of dynamic compassion and loving embrace. And this calm space, to experience it a little more, this calm space is not based on indifference, that whatever is happening outside, I don't care about it. It's an open space. And the basis of this space is equality, not indifference. The basis of this space is equal endurance of everything. This space is ready to face everything. In medicine, we say whatever cannot be cured needs to be endured. So this is a space which is not going to run away from situations which seem hopeless to us. It will offer equal endurance to everything. And even if there has to be an indifference, there is an impartial indifference. Very often, the indifference of the mind is indifferent towards others and being very sensitive towards one's own things, or vice versa. But this is an impartial indifference. And that is where the witness starts to move from behind to above. Sri Aurobindo talks a lot about it, that eventually the witness or the Sakshi Bhav initially needs to deepen and gradually move out of oneself and be seated above, so that there can be an impartial indifference without any aloofness. So these are the two aspects of the static and dynamic space. That's the beauty of Sri Aurobindo's work. He doesn't let the sadhak settle on, okay, I will become this calm sakshi witness, or just the dynamic workspace. There has to be a unition of both. The two polarities need to come together in whatever process we are engaging in, whether it is witnessing, whether it is action, whether it is jnana, whether it's bhakti. Both need to come together simultaneously. And then moving further, when one has experienced a certain release from the space of heart, then the next step is a release from the thought mind. Because initially when we are witnessing from the space of the mind. Still the analysis is on, the thought mind is still creating thoughts. The resistance in us is felt at two levels to this inner flow, or the muck around the bulb or the light of the soul is coming from the prana, and it is also coming from the thought mind. This resistance at the vital level manifests as emotions of anger, fear, hatred, jealousy, or even desire of looking at something outside is a kind of a resistance to looking inwards towards that bulb of light or that psychic space. But in the thought mind, it manifests as judgments. The resistance manifests as judgments. This is good, this is bad. It manifests as dogmas. This is how things are. It manifests as self-doubt or doubting the situation. All these ways are ways of the thought mind resisting this true inner bulb of light. So there has to be, once there has been a certain separation from the physical and the prana, there has to be a separation from this thought mind as well. It holds a very important practical importance in our life, because the moment we are identified with the mind, one of the common things that we all experience is fear of being wrong. The body experiences, if we are identified with the body, we experience fear of survival or fear of death. So anybody who attacks us, there will be a fight and flight response. The prana experiences a fear of suffering. So it runs away or is repelled from something where there is pain or suffering and is attracted towards something which is nice. With the mind, if I am this mind and somebody says you are wrong, then it triggers a fear of being wrong and a fear of survival in us. And all our defenses at that moment are activated in order to protect ourselves. That I am not wrong, I am right. You are wrong. And this is a major source of violence in the world. Fear of being wrong, which comes from the identification with the mind. And hence, the importance of de-identifying with the mind. And as we de-identify from the mind and somebody says you are wrong, then there is a possibility of neutrally observing the data and making good sense out of it without creating those defenses around us. So here Sri Aurobindo offers an affirmation to help us separate from this thought mind as well. And it goes as, this too I am not. I am not the thought or the thinker. All these ideas, opinions, speculations, strivings of the intellect, its predilections, preferences, dogmas, doubts, self corrections are not myself. All this is only a working of Prakriti which takes place in the thought mind. So there is a common pattern to all these affirmations, that one acknowledges the common patterns that go about in the physical, in the vital, in the thought mind, and then affirms that this is one working of the Prakriti. So in the thought mind, I am neither the thought nor the thinker. I am not the dogma, I am not the self corrections or the doubt. This is how the mind works. It is, which is important when we are separating ourselves from the vital and the physical. This self correcting mind is important, but eventually one says to oneself that I am not even this thought or the thinker, this self correction, this self doubt. This is not myself. This is one working of the Prakriti in the thought mind. And that brings in again another possibility of observing the mind. And the mind, going through its cycles, gradually starts to come to silence. And when one is witnessing the thought mind, the vital, which is throwing up the dual emotions, springing up the sense of I from the subconscious mind, I like this, I do not like this. Or when the physical prana creates that sense of physical experience, we stand back from it. And rather than analyzing, when a strong emotion comes, or a strong thought comes, or a strong feeling comes, and there is a re-identification, there is a possibility of reflecting and perceiving intuitively that what is it that we have identified with in this moment. Sometimes it will be the mind which will become active, and it will be a sense of self-doubt or a fear of being wrong emerging. Sometimes it would be an emotion of conflict in the vital. And every time we are able to reflect, perceive, acknowledge, and de-identify, the awareness expands. And as the awareness expands and deepens, gradually and slowly, it becomes more and more impersonal. And from that space, there is that calmness that emerges in the whole being. The physical, the vital, the mind becomes silent. And in that silence, the mind has the possibility of mirroring the higher levels of mind and the intuitions. And as it starts to mirror these higher intuitions, it moves from liberation to its own perfection or higher possibilities. And through this process, one moves from Shuddhi to Mukti to Siddhi, a process from liberation to perfection of these three faculties. Sri Aurobindo ends this chapter here, and one of the beauty of any chapter written by Sri Aurobindo is, it's complete in itself, and yet it is a part of a process. So this process has further steps, because once we de-identify from these three, the consciousness can still hang and certain aspects of ego can still remain. I'm not this physical, mental, or vital, but I'm something which is controlling all three. Or it just hangs like in the limbo. It further needs to be liberated, which will be discussed in subsequent chapters. But this process is complete in this chapter itself, because using this itself, one can gradually enter into the impersonal witness position and experience that love, delight, higher compassion, and the silence of mind, mirroring higher intuitions. So it is complete in many ways. To summarize this chapter, we first talked about the 4 steps of yoga. First, we talked about the setting our compass right. We are seeking the driving force, the tapas shakti. That is the seeking of Jnana Yoga. Then we explored the 4 steps to any form of yoga: Shuddhi, Mukti, Siddhi, and Bhukti. Then we briefly summarized the 3 aspects of purification: purification, concentration, and renunciation. And then subsequently, we talked about the principle of life energy, how it is. It goes out seeking things, experiences satisfaction or dissatisfaction, and then gets attracted or repulsed by things. And then it influences the intellect into giving unequal value to everything. And then there was step-by-step affirmations and process for a release from the physical, from the vital, and from the mind. It drew an aspiration in us to separate ourselves from the muck of the mentalized prana and to be able to mirror the true light bulb of the psychic entity into our emotional being. If there's anything we can carry from this talk, is this aspiration to mirror the true element in us and not be the Dhritarashtra or the puppet in the hands of the life energy. Thank you. Sir, would you like to add something? Om Hrim Shri Gurubhyo Namah. Om Hrim Shri Gurubhyo Namah. Om Hrim Shri Gurubhyo Namah.